So you've heard of Dungeons and Dragons, but don't understand it. Maybe you've heard of it from pop culture and things like Critical Role or Baldur's Gate. Maybe your coworkers talk about it, but it all sounds like gibberish to you. Maybe you've wanted to play it yourself, but it's so complicated, even the beginner guides are overwhelming. Or maybe you have a loved one who's interested, and you want to understand it so you can show an interest and support them.
Hi, Dad.
Well then, this guide is for you! In this episode, you will learn the very basic concepts of what the game is and how it is played. Over the next 5 episodes, we will teach you the very basic game mechanics. Yes, it does take 6 episodes to teach you the basic concepts. Now over to our host, Amory Bowie. Disclaimer: the series is to understand what Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is and how it is played. It will not cover subjects such as how to optimize play, its expansive material, any previous editions, how to become a lich, or how to deal with group conflict. The concepts and mechanics of Dungeons & Dragons have incredible history and nuance, and for the purpose of instructions will be summarized, condensed, or glossed over. Please keep that in mind before posting mean comments. Oh, hello! You seem to have caught me during my reading time. What am I reading? Why, the Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook. Boy, there sure are a lot of books relating to Dungeons & Dragons, which can make learning the game quite overwhelming. Why don't I get changed into something more appropriate, and we'll get started. Now, Dungeons & Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game. Whoa now! The viewer likely doesn't even know what that means. I was getting to that.
16 hours into filming and editing Amory here. I forgot to film a section where I do anytime I say a word that will be defined later in the series, this box will appear, followed by this, or accompanied by this sound. If I do not, or if the box does not appear, that either means I've already defined it, so you should look earlier in the... I gave up on the voice. Earlier in the episode or earlier in the series, or it will not be defined. Sorry, you're gonna have to Google that. I'm also human and make mistakes. Evidently enough. So, some things are gonna get missed. Sorry for the joke breakdown. Recording this one was hard.
A tabletop role-playing game is exactly what it sounds like. A role-playing game you play atop a table. Well, not always a table, but we'll get to that. A role-playing game is a game in which you play the role of the character you control, thinking, speaking, and making decisions as if you were that person. Speaking in a voice or silly outfits, fully optional. People call Dungeons & Dragons a board game, and that gives them some false assumptions. They see this image of a person controlling a monster on a board and other people fighting it, and they assume that's what the game is. It isn't. And even when it is only a single aspect. This is far more representative, as most of the game is keeping track of information and values to decide or determine your actions, discussing those actions, or using the rolling of dice to assist in determining the outcomes of those actions. We call these pen and paper games because that's all you really need. Because so little is needed for gameplay, a large portion of the player base actually plays over the computer, which makes the term tabletop not exactly representative. In the same way the term game isn't either. We'll get to that. Here is how Dungeons & Dragons is played. There are a few people playing the game, while one person runs the game. In Dungeons & Dragons, this person is called a Dungeon Master, a Game Master, a DM or GM. We'll talk about them later. All you need to know is that they run the game. The players, with the help of the DM, design their characters, their personalities, their backstories, and choose a class from the game, each with their own unique mechanics and abilities. While playing the game, while the specifics and approach vary from group to group, the DM describes what's happening, and then will ask the players what they would like to do. The players then describe what they would like to do, and if the action should be difficult or have varying degrees or outcomes, the DM will ask them to roll dice to represent how good they perform this action. How well, grammar. This is called a skill check. We'll get into that further in episode 3. They then add or subtract values to the result of the roll. These values they get from various places and represent how good they are at this type of action. After all this is added up, the number from the player's roll is then compared to how difficult the DM thinks the action would be. This is called a difficulty class, or a DC, and then the DM describes the result or consequences of the action. For example, if you wanted to pick a lock and had a set of lockpicks, the DM would ask for the relevant check. If you rolled your d20, we'll get into dice later, don't worry about it, and you had the result of 15, but your character is very good at lockpicking, so you add a +7 to that roll. Your result is 22. And since it's a simple lock, you only needed a 13 or higher to successfully pick the lock, so you do so with ease. Your actions are not limited to the abilities of your class. You can attempt pretty much anything. There are rules in place for all kinds of things, like haggling over wares, how high you can jump, or even how long you can hold your breath. And even if you attempt something that doesn't have set rules for it, the DM can come up with something, or just straight up tell you the action is impossible, such as if you were trying to open a door by thinking really hard. Not gonna happen. They might make you roll just cause it's funny though. There's likely a lot about that you still don't understand, especially surrounding the DM. It'll make more sense as we cover more ground, as there's too much related information for me to explain things one at a time. For now, I'm going to show you what a minute of gameplay might look like. There'll be a lot you don't understand about it, and that's okay. This is just to put what I said into context, and to show you an example of what players describing their actions might look like. And also, so I'm not just sitting here lecturing you. Let's take a look. As you descend down the dark stairs, illuminating the ancient stone with your torchlight, the stairs end and open into a room. The room is medium-sized, about 30 feet wide, 40 feet long, of smooth stone and rotting wood. It is unlit, save for your torchlight. There is sparse furniture, a few tables, 2 bookshelves, a sconce or two, and a wooden door at the other end of the chamber, just barely beyond the edge of your torchlight. What do you do?
I'd like to check for traps at the base of the stairs leading into the room.
Good call. Make an investigation check.
I rolled a 16 and I have a +6 to investigation, so that's a 23.
With the 23, you easily notice that there is a razor-thin wire at the bottom of the stairs going across the stairwell and leading into the wall, clearly attached to some kind of mechanism. Whether time has rendered it inoperable, impossible to tell.
I pointed out to the group and helped them over it.
You all successfully step over without triggering the trap. And are now in the room. What are you all doing?
I'd like to check the bookcases.
Just looking at titles or actively searching through the books?
I'd like to be thorough and skim a little bit of each one to see what they're about.
Alright, that'd take about 2 to 3 minutes. Make an investigation check. While they're doing that, what is everybody else doing?
I got a 19.
We'll resolve that in a minute.
If that door has a keyhole in it, I'd love to look through it.
It does, and as you do look through it, you notice that the other side is completely pitch black, except for a little bit of torchlight peeking out from under the door.
Ranger, you can see in the dark, can't you? Could you please look through this keyhole for me?
Yeah, I'll give it a look.
While dark vision does allow you to see in the dark, it is still dim light and it is a very small keyhole, so that's going to be disadvantage on this perception check.
The lower of my 2 was an 8, but I've got a +5 in perception, so that's a 13.
The keyhole is small, and the room ahead looks big, so what little you do see is silken strands stretching across the room, and what looks to be a shape, solid and unmoving within them, deep in the darkness.
Spiders. I don't think they've noticed us yet, though. Everyone stay quiet and keep the torch away from the door.
I'm the one holding the torch, so I'd like to back up to the base of the stairs, making sure not to step on the tripwire.
Okay, everyone please make a stealth check, and while we're at it, Wizard, what was the result from your investigation check?
19.
Okay. Most of the books are old and have rotted away, with a lot of their text being faded. What you do find in legible quality is a cookbook, a novel about seafaring, and what seems to be hastily and half-finished rantings on enchanting theories.
I pocket the enchanting book for later reading, and while I'm at it, might as well grab the seafaring novel. As for the stealth check, Yeah, that's a 1.
Oh, God damn it, no!
See, describing actions, rolling to see how well they do them, and then determining results. But how do they decide where they are or what they should be doing? That's part of the DM's job. They make and/or run the game. Make the game? What do you mean? Remember when I said that D&D isn't exactly a game? Well, this is what I mean. While the people playing Dungeons & Dragons are playing a game, Dungeons & Dragons itself is more of a system of rules and mechanics for you to create your own self-contained game, with a lot of different options all set in a much larger world, all controlled by the Dungeon Master. Or your DM could run one of Dungeons & Dragons' pre-made campaigns called modules. And while those modules have all the information needed to play that game, no two playings are the same, and most look completely different for a number of reasons. The main reason being the DM is different between games, and therefore, so are the games themselves. Before we continue, let me define a few keywords. Since in Dungeons & Dragons you play a character in an entire world, the game takes a long time to play. A campaign is the unique version of D&D your group is playing in and encompasses all aspects and events within it. A setting is the world and general theme of the campaign. A session is a single continuous period of gameplay, usually a few hours once a week. The game will take many sessions to complete, otherwise it is a one-shot. A game that only takes one session to complete. So, a campaign is the series of events in your game of D&D unique to your version only. The party got supplies, they went to a dungeon, they killed a dragon. These events take place in a world called the setting. Many people can play in the same setting, but because your group and your actions are different, the campaign winds up completely different. The party got supplies in the town of Fenrun, including a diamond because the party has a cleric and they need one, then went to the dungeon of Firewind Pass to slay the dragon that's been pillaging the nearby area. The group plays through many sessions, exploring the world and furthering the goals of the campaign. Campaigns can have firm goals like defeat the evil lich, or depose the corrupt king, or run a crime syndicate. Or campaigns can have no predetermined goal, and the players decide what they want to do and accomplish. The point of Dungeons & Dragons isn't necessarily to win, but to have fun with your friends and build a story over time through the actions and decisions you make in your campaign. We call this collaborative storytelling, and it's a really wonderful thing. Anyways, back to Dungeon Masters. The Dungeon Master is the one who runs all this stuff. They are simultaneously the narrator and the referee. They play the role of everything else in the world that isn't the player's characters. They are the man behind the curtain, so to speak. They are the most important person in the group and have many difficult responsibilities, including, but not limited to, understanding and adjudicating the rules of the game, letting the players know what they can and cannot do, or determining the difficulty of their action, either learning or designing the campaign setting, designing encounters for the players to, hey, look at that, encounter. They decide, dictate, and describe the actions of everywhere and everything else, which includes all the enemies in combat, and also describe what's happening and what everything looks like well enough for the players to understand what's going on, oftentimes with the help of visuals, which is where you see those miniatures and boards that's often associated with the game. DMs don't have ideas for everything that could ever happen in the game, though we'd like our players to think we do. So usually we use resources and tables provided by the Dungeons & Dragons books. Found a treasure hoard? Roll on the hoard table to see what's in it. Players went to a town you don't have written yet? Roll on the NPCs and buildings table to see what it's like. They went off on a random trek through the woods? Roll on the forest encounter table to see what they run into. Encounters are the small in-between events that happen along a party's journey that aren't necessarily important to the larger story. They could be combat encounters, such as fighting a wounded troll that has wandered onto the road, to a social encounter like encountering a strange man with a broken down carriage who's harboring a secret. Even just happenstance, such as coming across a cursed sword lodged in a cliff face, and when you equip it, makes you want to stab cliff faces. Anything could happen, especially once your players start making decisions, because it is inevitable they're going to start making stupid ones. In summation, Dungeons & Dragons is a game full of rules and mechanics for a person called the Dungeon Master to design and run a game in a large world, and for players to create their characters with unique abilities within that world, and then make and describe decisions as those characters, with the DM determining how difficult it would be and the outcomes of those actions. as the DM describes what's happening around them as they explore a fantastical world and tell a story together. And now you know the very basics of what D&D is. Next episode, we'll be going over characters and classes. So thanks so much for watching, and leave a comment down below if there's anything you want me to go over, remembering that this is a basic Dungeons & Dragons guide. Bye-bye!